Hello, good evening. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. Joining me in the studio this evening, I have two guests. This evening we've got Sam Payton, who is one of the co-organisers of the Save Loch Lomond campaign. Welcome back to the show to you, Sam.
Hi, Gordon.
Hi there, Sam.
How are you?
And also joining us
doing?
tonight, from her sheep farm somewhere in darkest Stirlingshire is Day Tucker, our Rural Affairs spokesperson. Good evening, Day.
Good evening, Gordon.
Nice to see you both. Listen, I'm going to plunge straight into the day's, first of all, the coronavirus statistics today. And as of 2 p.m. today in Scotland, there has been a total of 35,392 coronavirus tests concluded. And of these, 28,290 tests were confirmed negative. 7,102 tests were positive. 196 patients were in intensive care last night with 191, sorry, I beg your pardon, I'll read that again. 196 patients were in intensive care last night with 191 of those having tested positive. This marks an increase of 354 confirmed cases since yesterday. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection has sadly risen to 779. The latest United Kingdom figures available show 13,729 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness. A total of 327,608 people have been tested, of which 224,515 were negative and 103,093 were confirmed positive. Now, first, let me come to you, Day, because I haven't spoken to you for a while, Day. I don't know whether it's the lambing season has kept you busy, but
Yes.
it looks to me that the figures still look remarkably similar in terms of the numbers of deaths and the increases in people being tested positive. It doesn't look like we've hit the peak yet.
Yes. I really don't know because I honestly haven't been following it. I've hardly had the television on, so I'm not much good to you.
Okay, too busy with the lambs, Day, I should think.
I mean, it is absolutely exhausting.
Has it been a good lambing season? Well, listen, I'll let you have a rest there, Dave, for a moment. I'll fling this open to Sam. Sam, you've not been at lambing today.
No, I've not been at lambing today.
What do you make of the new figures coming out? They seem remarkably similar to the last 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, I wonder if that's us kind of starting to kind of plateau, is the nice word that they like to use.
Well, it's not. It doesn't seem to be. Yeah, they don't seem to be increasing at a higher rate anymore.
Which, I mean, each death is just a tragedy for the families. It's just heartbreaking. So yeah, it would be. We're
not on the downward path yet, Sam.
No, not yet. We're not there yet, but hopefully that's us getting there, and less families are going to be suffering and having to go through this. It's just heartbreaking. It's still, I mean, even last night in the show I was saying it's just this is a bit of the show I don't like. You know, it's because it's heartbreaking. It's real people. It's real families. It's, you know, and it's getting to a stage that everybody knows somebody.
And also, they're not really getting a chance to grieve in the normal way either, Sam, because of the restrictions on the funerals, only being able to have 6 people present.
Yeah, and the thing is, as part of the grieving process is the funeral and things like that as well, and being able to be around your family and the close friends, and it's just heartbreaking. I can't imagine what people are going through right now. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. And of course, the lockdown's still in place. And in our next story, actually, it's now been said that following today's COBRA meeting, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has said that the coronavirus lockdown in Scotland should continue for at least another 3 weeks, although she's confident that the lockdown appears to have slowed the COVID-19 spread. She said, "We're by no means through this yet," and has encouraged people to continue staying at home to prevent further spread of the virus. The English Health Minister, Matt Hancock, said that novel coronavirus outbreak is starting to peak, but it's too early to lift the lockdown because the virus would run rampant if the government eased social distancing measures. We think it's too early to make the change, Hancock said. While we've seen a flattening of the number of cases and thankfully a flattening of the number of deaths, that hasn't started to come down yet. We just released all the measures. If we just released all the measures now, then this virus would run rampant once again, and we can't let that happen. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is still recuperating from COVID-19 complications at Chequers, his country residence. Dave, if I might come to you for this one. I know you have been literally living in isolation yourself up there for a while with only the sheep for company. But it does seem now as if we have reached a plateau in the numbers of cases. And everybody is now just wondering how long it's going to be before the cases start to reduce.
Well, yes, except that there is this worry that it will kick off again if we're not careful. And people have been very good, I think. I managed to get up to the village today for the first time since I last saw you on Broadcasting Scotland, which I think must be about a month ago. But not for specifically reasons of self-isolation. We have to self-isolate anyway because we're stuck here with the sheep. But it was amazing to be in the village. And yes, there were a few people walking to the shops and back, or to the bank or whatever. Not the bank, the cash place. But they were all keeping their distance. They were chatting to each other from a distance, which I thought was really good. And all the villages around here have the community spirit that's been going on Facebook is quite outstanding. And all the new little local supply for food and things that people might need, and identifying people who are in need. And all these gaps have been filled by people who are prepared to help out. It's really been very, very inspiring what's happening.
Well, it's good to know that that the virus will bring out the best in people where you live, at least. If I might talk to you, Sam, I don't know how things are panning out down in your neck of the woods at the moment, but are we seeing the same level of community spirit where you live?
Yes and no. There's a kind of mixed bag here. Very much when, you know, if I'm having to go out to my wee local shop, you know, people are respecting social distancing. They are, you know, they're very much doing that. And as Dave says, you know, when people are communicating and talking, it's from the distance, but people are still shouting across the road and things like that, saying, how are you? How's the family? How's everybody doing? Which is lovely. But we've got the other kind of side of that. We've got people who, and it's the fear's kicked in. And what's happening is, if they are if kids are out playing in their garden, they're threatening to phone the police. Families who are allowed to go out and exercise. You know, I live right down by the river. You know, so people do use that for a form of exercise, to walk up and down the towpath, which is absolutely allowed. But if people are seeing, you know, more than a couple of folk, regardless whether they're, you know, they're from the same household, they're threatening to phone the police. And this is going on Facebook and social media, which is quite scary, quite frightening. And people are, in my area, are actually asking for the cyclepath or towpath to be formally closed down to stop people from using it. Now, where I live, I'm in a village. And in order for me, unless I'm going to my local shop, in order for me to get shopping from the nearest town, it's safer for me to go on the cycle track than it is on the roads to cycle or to walk.
Yeah.
And so I would imagine that I pass the odd person when I'm having to do that. I do that once a week.
Yeah.
And you are seeing, you know, people making the similar journeys, you know, and you know, they're doing it out of necessity, not because, you know, for hobby reasons or whatever, you know, or just out for a wander. But people are actually calling, because they're saying there's too many people on the cycle track. It needs to get closed down. And it's beggars belief, because how are people meant to get from their because the other option is you use, if you don't have a car, because my car went into the garage just before lockdown, so I've still not got my car back yet.
So,
and there's no way I'm going to use public transport at this period in time.
There are always people, I think, twitching their curtains when they see something they disapprove of, and I guess this just brings out the worst in that sort of person.
And I think it's the fear. It's about fear, not understanding, and I think also as well, it's about the fact that, one, they don't understand what's really happening and they're getting scared, and two, they don't understand the kind of social distancing and the lockdown. So they're putting their kind of how they perceive the rules. At the end of the day, if people are using the cycle track to go and get their shopping, medical, I mean, my doctor's surgery, and to go to the chemist, I need to go cycle. I need to kind of go on the cycle track. So at the end of the day, as long as people are social distancing and being sensible and taking the necessary precautions, I feel safer on the cycle track with other people than I would do going on a public bus or train at this moment in time.
You're best to take what you think is the safest option, I suppose, Sam.
Yeah, being cooped up in a bus or cooped up in a train.
Yeah, it's even more of a risk, I would have thought.
I'm not saying it's not safe, but it's a bit more worrying. Whereas if you're out in the fresh air and you're on your bike cycling along, I would, and to be honest, I mean, it's very rare I actually see people. I mean, I do see people, but not to the extent of a normal day, sunny day down at this neck of the woods. When people are out and about, you're not.
Sam, I'm sorry to stop you, Sam. We need to move on to the next story. But I was just going to say to both you and today, just be glad you're not a man, because the next story is about the death rate amongst men, particularly in England, from coronavirus. Men died of coronavirus at twice the rate of women in England and Wales in March, according to the ONS statistics. The data, which gives more in-depth information on the age, gender and pre-existing conditions of those who died both inside and outside of hospitals, shows that men had significantly higher rates of death from COVID-19 than women in all of the older age groups. 1 in 5 COVID-19 deaths occurred in people aged between 80 and 84. A further 18% were aged between 85 and 89, while deaths in the 75 to 79 and the 90 plus age categories accounted for 16% of deaths each. The ONS found that the mortality rate was significantly higher in England at 69.7 deaths for every 100,000 people than the rate in Wales, which is 44.5 deaths for every 100,000 people. The data also offers further insight into the proportion of victims with underlying health conditions. The accompanying ONS analysis states that by the start of March, the number of deaths a day was below the 5-year average, likely because of the mild winter and low levels of circulating flu. However, towards the end of the month, we can see that the number of deaths was above the 5-year average. The figures cover all deaths that were registered up to the 6th of April, but which occurred in March. However, it's expected that the number of deaths for the month will increase as more are registered. By comparison, Scottish figures released yesterday show a death rate of 43.5% female to 56.55% male deaths. Deaths in care homes in Scotland was at 24.6%, relatively low by international comparisons, where the average care home death rate is about 50%. Some care homes in England have said that the death rate there could be as high as 70%. Dave, if I might speak to you first about this particular set of statistics. Now, it might seem a bit of a no-brainer because men generally tend to die younger than women, that men might be disproportionately affected by the coronavirus.
Well, it's really interesting, this, but it is absolutely no surprise to any sheep farmer. The majority of deaths are usually the tups and not the ewe lambs.
It's a strange thing about mammals, yeah.
Billions.
Do you think this is common to all mammals, all warm-blooded creatures, Day, or is it just sheep and people?
I can only tell you that in my experience, it's the tups that are less resilient to anything.
I wonder why this is. I mean, it always felt a bit unfair to me. There are, of course, big differences, Dave, between the statistics in Scotland here, where we are, and those in England. Yeah. In England, they seem to have a very high death rate per 100,000 But men in Scotland are not dying at exactly the same rate as they are in England. For some reason, England has a higher male death rate than we do.
Perhaps, again, it's to do with resilience, and how you cope with a harsher country. We have greater challenges weather-wise and all the rest of it up here.
Do you think perhaps even the weather makes a difference to us? Do you think we're hardier or something like that?
I do. I think we are hardier.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard this said actually by people that when you live in a harsh climate, you do tend to be more resilient to all kinds of, particularly flus and colds. I'm not sure if it's true, but I've heard it said.
Yeah. And the same probably applies to people in rural areas will be more resilient than people living in urban areas where the challenges are much greater and the stresses are much greater.
It's funny, you would think that people who are perhaps exposed to more viruses and infections by living in a busy place would actually have a more resilient immune system. This seems kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah. But then they live softer lives.
Yeah, you think it's partly to do with the pace of life as well, and the stresses of modern living.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to continue the theme now with our next item, which is the UK government being said to be beyond reckless to impose a hard Brexit deadline. Now, in the midst of the COVID-19 virus, it's easy, believe it or not, it is quite easy to forget that Brexit is still actually happening. And the SNP has said that it is beyond reckless for the UK government to impose a Brexit hard deadline in the middle of a global pandemic and an economic crisis, after Downing Street sources ruled out any extension to the transition period. Ian Blackford MP said it was deeply irresponsible for UK ministers to put jobs, businesses and the economy at risk when people are already struggling to get through the coronavirus crisis. The SNP Westminster leader said the Tories were putting blind dogma ahead of the interests of the people and nations of the UK, and said the Conservatives must think again. Commenting, Mr Blackford MP said, "It's beyond reckless for the Tory government to impose a Brexit hard deadline in the middle of a global pandemic and an economic crisis. People, public services and businesses are already struggling to get by. Imposing a Tory hard Brexit at the end of the year would deal another devastating blow at a time when our economy will need all the support it can to recover. UK ministers must think again and do the responsible thing and request an extension to the transition period. It would be deeply irresponsible and completely unforgivable to put blind Brexit dogma ahead of the interests of the people and the nations of the UK." If I might come to you, Sam, for some response to this, what do you think? Is Ian Blackford right? Are they being irresponsible by not asking for a transition extension?
They are being completely irresponsible. I completely agree with Ian Blackford on this. At the end, they've got 3 meetings lined up. First one starting next week, and the final meeting's going to be sometime in June. I can't remember the dates off at the top of my head. And I just think we're so busy dealing with this pandemic at the moment. Brexit is the last thing we should be dealing with. This should be put in the back burner. And I think it just goes to show you the incompetence of the UK government, really. And I'm not really surprised that they're pushing ahead and they're just steamrolling into this.
It's also been reported elsewhere today in other sources that the European Union has said that it is quite happy to give an extension to the United Kingdom, and they seem to be baffled at the response of the UK government. It
makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense at this moment in time. People are... the European Union, Britain, everywhere is struggling right now with the pandemic, and they're just blindly steamrolling into Brexit when we're dealing. They need to sort out their responses to the COVID-19 first before dealing with Brexit, and it's
Well,
It's bizarre. It's absolutely.
There have been other instances, of course, Sam, of the Conservatives' dogma getting in the way, even at the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak, when the European Union offered the UK the chance to buy a large number of ventilators using a European organised scheme where they could combine their buying power to get the ventilators at lower costs, and this was knocked back.
The thing is with them, though, it's all about this kind of Tory British arrogance, where they know better than everybody else, and it's but it's just crazy. Right, Gordon, I'm going to say cheerio, and I'll see you again in about 15-20 minutes, because I'm about to disappear.
What are you going to do, Sam?
Okay, I've just got a message through there saying.
Okay, well, Sam, listen, we'll let you go. I know why you're disappearing off, and our viewers will find out a bit later on in the programme. All right, I've got to move to you today.
Right, I'll see you all later.
Okay, Sam, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye now. Okay, I'm going to just kick this over to you, Day. I know you've been sitting listening to this in the background, and I know that you will have opinions on the Conservative Party and putting Brexit dogma ahead of reality. I mean, does this make any sense to you?
Well, it doesn't to me, but then that's because I voted against Brexit. The only excuse I can give them is that he got in with this 80% majority, 80-seat majority, which seems to give them the right just to continue on their merry way with Brexit, because basically the English vote has said that is what they want, and they've got to get on with it.
I don't know if you saw the reports in this morning's newspapers, Day, that there are 2 plane loads of, I think, Romanian fruit pickers who are being flown, especially in chartered flights, to the UK specifically to come in and pick fruit. And this after after the supposed Brexit was going to stop all of these people coming over from Eastern Europe.
Yeah, it's absolute. I mean, how the English public can let all of this go and not do something about it. I mean, they can't all be stupid.
Well, now they're faced with a problem because they're having to now introduce workers from Romania into the fruit picking farms, but they're having to isolate them in small groups so that they're effectively self-isolating on a farm in small groups of workers. I believe there's several hundred of these Romanian fruit pickers coming over. But it just to me it seems just such a contradiction compared to the talk about Brexit and what it would mean, and how all these European workers, these cheap European workers who are causing wages to be kept down in the UK, were going to be shut out, and now we've got them being organised to fly over. It makes no sense.
And we're told that Boris Johnson's popularity is sitting at 51%.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's like the mystery of Donald Trump's popularity. It's a mystery, generally speaking, isn't it?
I mean, I've met anybody recently, given the bourg that we've ended up in. I just don't know people who can still think that he's wonderful.
Well, to pile more misery onto us this week, it's been revealed, of course, that there's been this PPE problem all through the week. With availability of personal protective equipment, but it's now been revealed that obviously that the PPE is subject to VAT at the moment, and an MP has called on the Chancellor to scrap VAT on personal protective equipment for care providers. The SNP's Stephen Flynn MP called on the Treasury to scrap VAT duty on personal protective equipment for care providers, warning that it was vital that care staff had access to equipment without facing financial barriers. In a letter to the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, the MP for Aberdeen South said that care providers are absolutely critical in the efforts to tackle the coronavirus pandemic, and every step must be taken to ensure they have the ability to purchase PPE that they require in order to protect their staff and residents. As it stands, VAT on personal protective equipment is not applied to the NHS, but it is applied to care providers purchasing the same key equipment. Earlier, Unison warned that no social care employer should be paying VAT for what has clearly become essential equipment. Commenting, Stephen Flynn MP said, "The safety and well-being of our frontline health workers and care providers are absolutely critical as they risk their lives to protect ours. In light of the COVID-19, the supply of personal protective equipment is of the utmost importance. While there is no VAT duty applied to this equipment to the NHS, it's concerning that VAT charges continue to be applied to care providers when purchasing the same essential equipment, such as masks, gloves and gowns. No one working in the front line protecting the public should face barriers to accessing PPE, and the UK government must urgently look to remove this unnecessary tax burden on care providers. I welcome Unison's calls and have written to the Chancellor to scrap VAT duties payable by care providers on PPE equipment as quickly as possible." Now, I don't know about you, Dave, but this reminds me of the story of the VAT on Scotland's police force and fire service, which is only very recently, I think, eventually got sorted out. But here we're now seeing VAT being applied disproportionately to care providers, even though the NHS doesn't have to pay it.
Yes, it does seem bizarre, doesn't it?
It's very odd.
Is that because they think that the care providers are a commercial business?
I guess it's the definition, yeah. It's between public sector and private sector, I think.
In this situation, surely it would be...
Yeah, I think the NHS is exempt from payments of VAT, as I understand it. But I think just about every care provider, certainly the care providers in Scotland, are mostly private enterprise. I think the few that were run by councils eventually became privately owned, but because they are private enterprises, they must pay VAT. And I guess if they're registered for that, they can claim it back, but they still have to pay it up front.
Yes, yes.
It's a 20% increase, I guess, on if that's the rate that is applied.
Yeah. And I don't know what rate is applied.
I guess, I mean, in your profession, Dave, there must be personal protective equipment for dealing with things in terms of veterinary medicine as well. You might have to have specialist equipment yourself.
Yes, we have to pay VAT 20% on the majority of things, but there's the odd thing that you don't. You pay 5% VAT, I think.
But it is charged at the full 20%.
But most things are the full 20%. You know, veterinary stuff.
I think it's definitely one of those things where it's a differentiation between the public sector and private sector, although we may end up going back and revisiting what happened with the police and fire service one day and find out why that happened. Anyway, we're going to move on to our next story, which is a disappointment at narrow changes to the job retention scheme. SNP MPs have been contacted by businesses and employees who have described their hopes being dashed over the narrow scope of the changes to the coronavirus job retention scheme. While many initially welcomed yesterday's announcement that the scheme would be extended to those employed by the 19th of March, it is now clear that from the detail that the UK government's strict criteria on real-time information submissions will prevent many businesses and employees from benefiting at all. The SNP Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Neil Gray MP has called on the Chancellor to make meaningful changes so that anyone with a contract of employment by the 19th of March is covered. The SNP is also calling for the Chancellor to reconsider his refusal to introduce a comprehensive financial package, including guaranteed minimum income, to ensure that no one is left behind. In commenting, Mr Gray MP said, "It's now clear from the detail that this announcement is not what it seemed. Thousands of businesses and workers will continue to lose out unless the UK government makes meaningful changes to fix the serious gaps in the coronavirus job retention scheme." SNP MPs have been contacted by many businesses and employees who say the narrow criteria being imposed has dashed their hopes of help. And frankly, that's not good enough. Further changes are now required so that anyone with a contract of employment by the 19th of March gets the support that they need. Now, Dave, it's common knowledge in most parts of Scotland, I think, that when you are applying for any kind of help from the government, that you always have to jump through a lot of hoops to get it. And there are always a lot of rules and deadlines applied to make it as tricky as possible, it seems, to get hold of the help that you need. This seems to be no exception.
Yes, I'm quite sure.
I mean, does it surprise you in any way, Di, that this has happened? Do you think the government is going to pay any attention?
No, not in the slightest. I think it's just the same old, same old. It's all about making it sound good and look good, but when you look underneath at the small print, it's just as difficult to get anything.
Well, I know from making applications for various forms of help during the coronavirus myself that it's incredibly difficult to get anything at all. It's not just the queuing, because there's so many people trying to apply at the same time, but the fact that you have to wait so long to get anything. And if you don't meet the criteria exactly, or if you have had a job contract after this period of the 19th of March, you could be completely left out.
Yeah. And when you look at the diversity of all these, help schemes,
yeah,
you think, why don't they just give us, or give the people who need it, the basic income? It would be so much simpler to help people through this.
There have been several articles published by quite prominent business people and experts across the world on economics, who've said actually that one of the simplest ways to solve this problem is to provide a simple basic income for everybody. And I think one suggestion was that everyone in America, this was an American economist was saying this, that everybody should get, I think the figure was something like $1,000 a week. It was some blanket figure which was supposed to represent the average wage across America. And the idea was everybody of working age would get it. And there were gasps that it wouldn't be able to afford this until he pointed out the amount of money they spent bailing the banks out in 2008 would have dwarfed the cost of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the double standards of these politicians that really upsets me. They're happy to bail out the banks, and they would do it again.
Well, we'll have to hope that something changes soon. Certainly the SNP has been firing away at the UK government on a number of different fronts for the last few weeks.
Not going to change, Gordon. They're just set in their ways, and the sooner we can divorce ourselves from that government, the better, because they are not a healthy government.
No, I think they're certainly not listening. Judging from the sheer number of stories of SNP MPs who are making such appeals for quite sensible measures to be put in place.
Yeah.
In fact, we've got another one coming up in our next story. This is the UK government is being asked to take heed of economic scenarios. And again, the SNP has urged the UK government to take heed of the mounting economic scenarios outlining the damaging and lasting impact of the coronavirus pandemic, and to go further in protecting citizens, frontline services and businesses. The Resolution Foundation findings revealed today that lockdown measures for 3 months could push unemployment to almost 2 million, around 5 million in a 6-month scenario, and over 7 million unemployed in the worst case 12-month scenario. The Office for National Statistics, a quarter of 5,000 businesses responding to the Business Impact of Coronavirus survey said that they reported having temporarily closed or halted trading. The Office for Budgetary Responsibility, one economic scenario highlighted the UK economy could shrink by 35% and unemployment could rise by 2 million. Even the IMF gets in on the act. The coronavirus dwarfs the losses that were triggered by the global financial crisis of 2008. And it's very likely this year the global economy will experience its worst recession since the Great Depression. Alison Thewliss MP, the SNP's shadow chancellor, said it's becoming clearer with the mounting economic scenarios that the impact of the coronavirus crisis will be damaging and lasting. And that is why it's vital that the UK government takes heed and goes much further in its support for citizens, frontline services and businesses. with the Resolution Foundation, the Office for National Statistics, the International Monetary Fund and the Office for Budgetary Responsibility, setting out dire economic scenarios for the road ahead. The government must take steps to alleviate the challenges. Now, I think it's fair to say that in the midst of all of the statistics that we get, particularly on this show and others, that it's very difficult for people out there to get a handle on the bigger picture. But this is an attempt to look at that, Day, it seems. Hello, Day?
Yes, sorry.
So it looks like, this is an attempt to look further down the road at how much worse things could be. But we're not hearing much from our own government about what they intend to do to alleviate these potential difficulties.
Yes. When you say our own government, do you mean the UK government?
I am talking about the UK government here.
Yes.
But the idea of 5 million unemployed, I mean, the last time we had figures of unemployment at 3 million was back in the early 1980s, during the deindustrialisation of Scotland.
That's right. I remember those days. I was teaching at Denny High at the time.
And I remember it too, Dave.
Yeah. Classes, the 50-year boys and third-year boys. And they were just so depressed, these lads. And mental health was something that wasn't talked about in those days. It wasn't recognised.
Indeed, it wasn't. No, you're right. I mean, I remember growing up in the 1980s at that time with, I think it was 3.5 million unemployed. And there were no jobs in Scotland. If you had just left school, it didn't matter what your exam results, you had to go to England to get a job. That was just the harsh reality in the 1980s.
Was that when they had that great television series where the guys from Liverpool went over to Germany to get work?
Auf Wiedersehen, Pet, yes.
Yeah.
Well, they actually had to go to Germany to find work.
They won't have experienced all that.
Well, you never know. It might be history repeating itself. Maybe we'll have another Auf Wiedersehen Pet series later in the year.
Well, that's exactly what I think this UK government, it's driving to, whether intentionally or unintentionally, because the German economy, I reckon, will always be okay.
Well, the other thing is that even if unemployment got that high, people had to look for work outside of the UK. With Brexit, we'd have a hard job getting into the European Union as well.
Yes.
This would make it even more difficult for young people to find work when we come out of this period. Anyway, I'm going to press on to our next story. And this is a Migration Observatory report on the EU's settlement scheme. Now, in response to the Migration Observatory report published today, the SNP Shadow Immigration Minister Stuart MacDonald MP has said the UK government plans to force EU nationals to apply to stay post-Brexit and have been fundamentally flawed since the day the Tory government first proposed them. This latest report confirms the Home Office can have no idea of what percentage of EU nationals have yet to apply for settled status and provides a stark reminder that many people will lose their rights to remain in their home country because they have been denied the support they needed or misunderstood their own immigration status. In reality, this means that hundreds of thousands of European Union nationals and family members losing their status overnight in July 2021. Without urgent action from the UK government, this threatens an ever wider reaching immigration scandal than Windrush. This only highlights the urgent need for what the SNP's MPs have been pushing for, a declaratory system so that everyone automatically has the status they need. This means that no one loses their rights, but still have the incentive to apply for the settlement scheme. So they have a document to prove their rights. It's time for the Tories to fix this before it's too late. Now, I suspect, Day, that given the sheer amount of fires that are having to be fought by this UK government, that a number of very important pieces of legislation like this are likely to sort of fall through the cracks. And I suspect this might be one of them.
Yes, quite sure it will be. Quite sure it will be. Is there no good news today?
I'm afraid not yet today. We've yet to come to a piece of good news.
I'm suffering from post-lambing exhaustion. I just feel I just don't even want to think about what's going on down in Westminster and the UK and the mess that they're making of everything.
Well, the mess that they're making is not unique to the UK. There have been problems, apparently, in other places. We'll be coming to a story from Ireland just shortly. Yeah. But the Migration Observatory report on the EU settlement scheme is, it's an international report. Migratory Observatory is really looking at how people move around the European Union. And they are basically firing a warning shot here, I think, across the UK's bows. They say that they could be doing something about this very quickly and very easily by just simply saying that Europeans who live here are automatically British citizens, are considered that way, but they have to apply for settled status as well. It wouldn't be so difficult, you would imagine, to do that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But I think the question is really, do the Tory party, with their political dogma of keeping Europeans out, want to be seen to be helping Europeans at all?
No.
I mean, are they playing to the Daily Mail readers who want to keep Europeans out?
Yeah, absolutely.
You think that's the motivation here, Dee?
And it's the same with the NHS. It's still up for sale. They'll still be selling it off, despite all the love-ins and rhetoric from Boris Johnson and so on and so forth. I don't believe a word that they say.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know if you happen to read The National sometimes, but there's been a number of articles, one by Paul Kavanagh-Mawson recently about the badge system that was announced by Matt Hancock. Instead of giving the NHS staff in the UK a big pay rise to thank them for all their efforts, they're giving them a little enamel badge which says "Care" on it. Somebody said it was like the worst ever episode of Blue Peter.
How insulting is that?
It was very insulting. It was met with gasps, I think, from the news people who were gathered to hear it. But that's
there's nobody within that Tory party who's saying, hang on a minute, just think about what you're doing and what message that sends out. I mean, there must be somebody left that has an idea of public sentiment and how it will react and turn on them if they continue down this road of lack of self-awareness.
Well, there were, I noticed recently there was a list of all the MPs who had voted against nurses' pay rises recently in the last government, I think it was. And there were almost the entire Tory party was listed. But the comparisons in Scotland and England, I think, are maybe different. I mean, we're still stuck in the whole issue of the coronavirus and the way that things are going. But in general, it seems that the Scottish figures generally are better. It appears that the Scottish government is managing the coronavirus crisis far more competently than the UK government, which seems to be completely incompetent. It feels like they're making it up as they go along sometimes.
Well, I think they are, and they really are scraping the bottom of the barrel. I mean, have you noticed how they sort of wheel out somebody to be a spokesperson for something or other? You've never seen these people before. You've never heard of them before.
That's true.
Know, because the reasonably competent ones have all either been shoved out or have left.
Well, it was interesting. I noticed that Priti Patel was wheeled out recently to do a little bit of presenting the statistics on coronavirus 2 days ago, I think it was, and she couldn't even get the number of tests right. I think she misspoke, but she came out with a really bizarre number, and it made all the newspapers. But it seems that there's very little talent in the pool of UK ministers.
There's a lack of talent. And when you compare Priti Patel's treatment by the press with the treatment that was given to Diane Abbott when she got her numbers muddled up.
Yeah.
You know, the press really have behaved appallingly.
Well, it seems like the press don't really want to ask any awkward questions. They just seem to go with whatever the government is saying at the time and not ask any awkward questions, which I think is a great shame.
They're all by non-dom wealthy millionaires, multimillionaires.
Well, apparently, this lack of competence is not unique to the UK, and in Irish nursing homes, the support that they're supposed to be getting is not happening fast enough. New measures to help protect residents in Irish nursing homes from the coronavirus are not being implemented fast enough, the Prime Minister Leo Varadkar said, as his acting government faced criticism for the speed of its response. Ireland has reported 444 corona-related deaths from a total of 12,547 cases, with 245 fatalities associated with nursing homes, pardon me, and 45% with other care homes. There are clusters of 2 or more cases in 155 of the country's 550 retirement homes. 8 people, or almost a third of residents at one old-age psychiatric home who had tested positive for COVID-19, the disease-caused the virus, died over the Easter holiday weekend, Ireland's Health Service executive said on Wednesday. The government promised nursing homes additional funds, more staff, priority testing, and the redeployment of senior medics to improve infectious disease control on April the 4th, after a number of clusters had begun to rise rapidly. That is all happening, but it isn't happening as fast as we would like it to, or as quickly as we would like it to. And that's just a reflection of the scale of the crisis, Varadkar told Parliament. Today, the front line of this emergency is not just in our hospitals, but also out in our nursing homes and our long-term care homes. I know in some countries, care homes have been described as the forgotten front line. We need to make sure that this country, they are not the forgotten front line. Health officials across the world have warned that the elderly are especially vulnerable in this pandemic. The median age of deaths in Ireland is 82, compared to a median age of 48 of all those infected, according to the Health Department's data. Varadkar extended the stay-at-home restrictions last week until May the 5th and said today that ideally he would like to be able to set out a roadmap towards easing the restrictions in very clear steps before the end of the month or prior to the 5th of May. So here we are today seeing similar issues cropping up in the Republic of Ireland to the ones we're facing in the UK as well, where care homes in England and Wales seem to have extremely high mortality rates, and in Scotland less so, 28%. I beg your pardon, I'm being corrected, 25% death rate in Scotland. And in Ireland, apparently, the rate of death is 55%. So Scotland seems to be doing something right for a change.
Yes, they don't get recognition for it, do they?
Well, apparently the press actually attacked the Scottish Government for its dealing with the figures, according to them, being too high. But it seems now that they're actually half the numbers of those in England and Ireland. And in fact, across Europe, the statistics seem to suggest Scotland is way out in front in terms of, pardon me, controlling the death rate amongst its elderly.
So when are we going to see the newspapers printing something like that? And if not, why not? And once it becomes internationally recognised that our figures were better, can we expect some sort of apology from the media?
Well, I think we know the answer to this day, and that is it's not going to happen with the British media because most of it is owned by gentlemen or ladies who happen to contribute to the Conservative Party's coffers. So there's always been a link there, unfortunately. Anyway, moving from Ireland now to Canada, believe it or not, and the Canadian border restrictions with the United States will remain for a long time. Canada's border restrictions with the United States will remain in place for a significant time as the two nations fight the coronavirus outbreak, the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said on Thursday. Washington and Ottawa agreed last month to clamp down on non-essential travel while allowing trade to flow between the two neighbouring nations, for trade to continue to flow between the two neighbouring nations across the long shared border. There is a recognition that as we move forward, there will be special thought given to this relationship. But at the same time, we know that there's a significant amount of time still before we can talk about loosening such restrictions, Trudeau said in a daily briefing. The United States President Donald Trump on Wednesday told reporters the two nations were doing well and said it would be one of the early borders to be released. The number of people killed by the coronavirus in Canada rose by just under 10% to 1,048 in a single day. The official data posted by the Public Health Agency showed. By 11 o'clock local time on Thursday, the total number of those diagnosed with the coronavirus had climbed to 28,899. The respective figures at the same time on Wednesday were 954 deaths and 27,540 positive diagnoses. So the Canadians and the Americans are talking about loosening the restrictions on their borders, but nobody seems to know when.
Yes.
It's the old story, but when do we do it?
Well,
I think we're all waiting until the figures start to decrease.
yes. Well, but I suppose they can only go by those figures, and they do seem to be elusive, don't they?
Very elusive, I think, by all accounts. Now, I noticed that Sam has just rejoined us on our other screen. Sam, welcome back.
Hi, Gordon. How are you?
Were you successful in your mission?
Yes, I am. I'm just getting set up at the moment and just waiting for our little surprise that we're going to be sharing with our viewers.
Okay, Sam. So when are we going to be treated to this surprise?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, of course.
Surprise.
I knew that, really. I just wanted you to say it, Sam. Anyway, just before we come to your surprise at the end of the show, we have another story still to come. And this one, for a change, is a little bit more positive. It is the Macker's poem for essential workers. Scotland's Macker, Jackie Kay, has written a poem to thank essential workers during the coronavirus outbreak. The national poet hails chemists, volunteers, carers, delivery workers, and those in the food supply chain. The Macker said that she wrote essential as a huge, big thank you to all those working on the front line. A video of the Macker reading the poem has been broadcast on Scottish Government's social media channel today. And I'm sure you will. Somebody's saying, why don't I read it? Okay, I'll read this to you. I'll do my very best with it. The poem is called Essential. Up doon the length of our land, Aberfeldy, Ardnamurchan, there's uplift, sharing, pass the baton, a front line forming, a hand to fierce hand, shop front workers down the aisle, new era queues metres apart, the chemist prescription warms the heart. Delivery folk vanish, ghost a smile, volunteers at the local food bank, shy half moon in a clear Scots sky. We leave with tins, groceries, goodbyes. Clamp in the gloaming when we say our thanks, and the sky greets with stars, and the bold birds sing, as we clink our links in the kindness line, holding absent hands for auld lang syne. That's rather lovely, actually. I read it terribly badly. I'm very sorry about that. That is rather a lovely poem. Since Sam is back, I tell you what, before I come to Sam, Dave, I know that you have been literally submerged with sheep recently. How has the lambing been this season?
Oh, absolutely frantic. 21 days, and we've got through 320 odd lambs.
That sounds amazing.
320 odd lambings. So there's only about 33 left to go, and it's been absolutely exhausting because we're one man down or one woman down because she's a nurse and she's been called into the Queen Elizabeth to work there.
So even the lambing's been affected by the coronavirus as well.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of the big farms.
So you're saying that you over 300 lambs born this month, is it?
No, we've got 600 odd lambs, but there was 353 ewes to lamb.
Right.
And we've got 32 left to go. In fact, Willie's just come in and said that's another 3. So we're getting through them very, very quickly.
That sounds amazing. Do you think has it been a slightly kinder winter this year? I know it rained heavily, but
Well, it was. We had better grass last year, and I think that made the yews and the tops quite chipper. And the tops, oh gosh, they really got on with it very quickly. I mean, everybody wants their land.
You heard it here first. Sam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Gordon.
All right, Sam, can you tell us where you are at the moment?
Well, I've kind of went over the river from my house to lovely, sunny Bellsmire. I love this place. This is where I grew up. So I'm over in Bellsmire at the moment.
So you're
Dumbarton. So we've got a wee surprise at 8 o'clock when we're doing everybody's out doing the clap for NHS. We've got a wee extra surprise. I'm led to believe that's going to be happening. So we're going to be sharing it with all the viewers.
Sounds very intriguing.
Yes.
How have you managed to organise this? Is this something that you've done yourself, or has it come about through a local organisation?
No, it's basically the person I know, and I've known for many years, from when I used to kind of work in an art gallery. And I had seen this person had been doing his wee personal thank you to the NHS and the carers and all the frontline workers. And I had contacted him and asked him if it would be okay for me to film him and put him on the show, and he agreed.
So
he's just getting ready,
getting
organised, and we'll be ready to go for 8 o'clock.
When are we allowed to open our eyes and look then, Sam?
Yes, then you're able to
8
open
o'clock,
your eyes and look.
We've got a couple of minutes. Well, listen, while you're there, Sam, I know we haven't talked in a little while about what was happening with Loch Lomond. Has there been any news since I last spoke to you about Loch Lomond and the campaign to prevent the large, holiday park being built there?
Yes, the holiday resort called Flamingoland.
Flamingoland, that's it.
At the moment, everything's all quiet, which is quite nice. I'm led to believe that the national park is currently temporarily closed at the moment anyway, so not much is going on in terms of planning applications and things like that at the moment.
Of course. Yeah.
But yeah, everything's fairly quiet because, as we all know, they had removed their planning application when they kind of realised how many people were actually against it. And there was a lot of questions raised about the legality of the planning application regarding the local planning development and various other things as well, SEPA and all the other things. So now, everything with the lockdown at the moment is kind of just went quiet. Yeah. So we are just still kind of looking into things, still researching, still using that time productively. Because imagine once the lockdown's been lifted, there may possibly be another submission from Flamingoland. Because remember, there's an exclusivity agreement between Flamingoland and Scottish Enterprise, which was extended. So that's still in play at the moment as well. So yes, we're still, as I say, we're researching, we're still being productive in that one. So
have there been any more positive? Has there been any more positive suggestions on what the piece of land might be used for?
There's been lots. We had a meeting before Christmas where we got the local community involved, and we got the cross-party politicians involved as well, and where we were getting the local community to put suggestions about if the land must be developed. Obviously, it must be within keeping of the national park, and it must be in keeping with the local development plan, and not to put any more kind of problems or strains on our current infrastructure.
Yeah.
So we'd asked people for various ideas, and some of the suggestions were coming out were absolutely amazing.
Are we nearly
organised? Oh, he's ready. Oh, we're getting ready.
All right. Well, we have 1 minute left on the clock, Sam. In fact, according to my clock, about 40 seconds.
Stephen, who's our piper for this evening, who's going to be playing for us.
Oh, fantastic. Well, listen, do you want us to give you a countdown, Sam?
I'm going to move you up.
Okay, Sam, we're counting down 20 now. All right, 15 seconds. Coming down to 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, start clapping. Oh, I see a number of your neighbours around. If I'm not mistaken, that sounds like the braes of Killiecrankie. Oh, sorry, I've been corrected. And Bonnie Lass of 5, I just remembered part of the lyrics. Do we know who the piper is? His name, I missed it at the beginning. Yeah. It's a bit windy down there. Linda? Is my mic muted? Oh. Bravo! That was wonderful.
Well done, Stephen.
Sam, are you still there? Can you hear us?
I'm still here.
That was wonderful, Sam. What a lovely surprise. Makes such a change from just clapping.
I know it does. It's so amazing. Yeah, Stephen's a very talented piper.
What's the name of the piper, Sam? What's the piper's name?
Stephen Granger.
Stephen Granger.
To say hello.
Bring him over. Let's talk to him.
He's blethering away to all the neighbours. Hold on.
Remember to socially distance from him, Sam. 2 meters apart, please.
Stephen.
Come and be on the TV, Stephen.
Too busy blethering to the neighbours.
Well, don't worry about it. If he's busy, he's busy.
Yeah, we'll get him on another night.
Oh, okay. You tell him from us. We'll hear from him later.
Yes, what we'll need to do is get him on for a wee interview another night.
Okay, Sam. Listen, thanks so much, Sam.
Oh, here he comes.
Oh, he's coming over.
You want to say hello? Right. I'll move away since we're doing social distancing.
Good evening, sir.
Gordon.
What a wonderful paper.
I'm making sure I'm 2 meters away from you, Gordon.
Well, I think you're quite a bit further than that, but okay, appreciate it. What made you?
That's for all our NHS nurses and all the emergency workers, the bin lorry workers, the grocery workers. One for Linda, one for Sam, one for Billsmeyer.
Definitely.
Well, listen, thank you very much for piping us out this evening. It was terrific.
Thank you, I enjoyed it.
Okay.
Right, I'll leave Sam, okay?
All right, thanks very much again.
Right, thanks, Stephen.
Okay, well, hopefully you caught all of that there, Dave.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, listen, we've run over time a little bit, but I'm quite happy to do that tonight. It was worthwhile to wait for the surprise tonight.
Sends a wee smile to the face.
It did. Thanks very much, Sam. Anyway, Day, I'd like to thank you as well. You look like you really need to go and have a lie down. All those hundreds of lambs that you've helped into the world in the last few weeks.
I want to go back out in case there's anything going on out there.
Okay, well,
and all the street is funny because the street's still out laughing and joking and things. It's lovely, so it's a good way of bringing people together.
Yes.
With social distancing.
Well, listen, thanks to both of my guests tonight, to Day Tucker up in Stirlingshire and to Sam and our Piper for this evening's performance. Thanks again to all of you. And this is the time when I traditionally like to ask people if they want to become supporters of Broadcasting Scotland. So if you would like to see more programmes from Broadcasting Scotland and you want to support us, you can do so by following the instructions on your screen, by going to www.broadcastingscotland.scot/register and then follow the prompts. That's it from Broadcasting Scotland at 7 crew for this week. I'll be back again on Monday. In the meantime, stay safe and stay 2 metres apart. Good night.